Aachen was an ancient capital of Emperor Charlemagne, a political and cultural center whose legacy shaped medieval Europe. By World War II, however, Aachen was only a small city on the German-Belgian border. Yet in the autumn of 1944, it found itself on the path of the advancing Allied armies. Determined to fight to the bitter end, the Nazis would turn it into one of the most brutal urban street-to-street fights on the Western Front during the Second World War. In early September 1944, Allied troops on the Western Front were pushing German forces faster than anyone expected. In just a few weeks, they had crossed all of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. On September 11th, the U.S. Army had already reached the German border 8 months ahead of schedule. The enemy was in disarray, and the road into Germany seemed wide open. General Eisenhower saw a chance to strike deep. He aimed to make a direct push toward the Ruhr, Germany's key industrial region. The easiest path leading toward the Ruhr Valley was through the Aachen Gap, a flat stretch of land near the border with Belgium and Holland. But standing in the way was the city of Aachen. Now, Aachen itself had no strategic significance. It had no war industry and was not a communications center. Allied troops could easily outflank it and move on. However, the Germans decided it was worth defending. For Adolf Hitler, Aachen was more than just a city. It was Germany's oldest city with a deep symbolic meaning. It was the residence of Charlemagne, whom Hitler considered the ruler of the First Reich. Losing the city would be a disgrace and a massive blow to the morale of the German population, who already had doubts about whether Germany was going to win this war. Therefore, he ordered Aachen to be held at all costs. The city of Aachen was a key part of the Siegfried Line, a long chain of fortifications built to defend Germany's western border, also known as the West Wall. It was protected by two main defensive belts, the Scharnhorst Line to the west and the Versland Line behind it. The system consisted of concrete bunkers, pillboxes, trenches, and barbed wire, all supported by minefields and artillery. The pillboxes were constructed with thick concrete walls and connected by trenches, making them difficult to destroy and easy to defend. Both the bunkers and pillboxes were positioned to provide interlocking fields of fire. The entire area was also covered with rows of dragon's teeth. These were short, pyramid-shaped concrete blocks designed to stop tanks. Much of this system had been built in 1938 by Hitler's order. By 1944, the old positions were rearmed and reinforced. Aachen's defensive network was, by all measures, a formidable obstacle, and any attempt to break through it would come at a high cost for the Americans. However, there remained a possibility that Aachen could be taken without a fight. When the U.S. First Army reached the Siegfried Line near Aachen on September 11th, German defenses in this sector were still weak. They were short of men, weapons, and equipment. The majority of troops were rushed in from other parts of the Reich. Among them were Luftwaffe ground crews and Navy personnel with only a few days of infantry training. Their morale was also questionable. While some soldiers were eager to defend their homeland, others were unprepared for frontline combat. The defenses of Aachen was commanded by General Gerhard von Schwerin, a veteran of the French 1940 campaign and the Eastern Front. As an experienced officer, Schwerin knew that his forces could not hold the city against a strong American attack. There were too few of them, with most having none or little combat experience. In such a case, he believed, it was better to surrender Aachen and spare its cultural heritage from destruction. On September 12th, Schwerin withdrew most of his men from the city. He left behind only a small rear guard and had a note delivered to the Americans, asking them to take over the city and protect its civilians. But the plan failed. The Americans hesitated and did not enter the city. German authorities quickly discovered what Schwerin had done and sent police units to Aachen to take control. Schwerin was removed from command and briefly arrested for disobeying orders. Hitler insisted that the city be defended at all costs. He kept more troops to be deployed into the area. The newly arrived forces began to strengthen defenses and prepare for battle. By mid-September, German units, including parts of the 12th and 49th Infantry Divisions, began digging in. They laid mines, set up barbed wire, and fortified key positions. It was at the same time that the American advance paused because of the overstretched supply lines in preparations for Operation Market Garden. The pause in operations was used by both sides to prepare for the next stage of the battle. By October 1944, the U.S. First Army was prepared to launch a major operation to capture Aachen. The attack involved two corps. Attacking from the south was 7 Corps, under the command of General Joseph Lawton Lightning Joe Collins. The corps comprised the 1st and 9th Infantry Divisions with the support of the 3rd Armored Division. Approaching from the west and north was the 19th Corps under General Charles Harrison Corlett, the Cowboy Pete. His unit consisted of the 30th and 29th Infantry Divisions, supported by the 2nd Armored Division. Although a formidable force on paper, it was constituted mostly from fresh forces. For example, 70% of the 1st Division structure was newly arrived troops. These soldiers barely had 2 weeks of preparation and street fighting before they jumped into combat. Similar was with armored units. There were tank crews comprised of young men who had never fired a shot in battle before. The American assault force was to be supported by the 9th Air Force with 360 bombers and 72 fighters. Before the operation, reconnaissance planes pinpointed 3/4 of all bunker installations along the front line and planned to bomb the hell out of them on the opening day of the assault. On the German side, the 81st Corps under General Friedrich August Schack included several divisions: the 12th Infantry Division, the 49th Infantry Division, and the 183rd and 246th Volksgrenadier Divisions. The 275th Infantry Division was held in reserve. German armor included the 506th Heavy Panzer Battalion with Tiger tanks, the 902nd and 341st Sturmgeschütz Brigades with assault guns, and the 519th Heavy Anti-Tank Battalion with Jagdpanthers. Evidently, both sides committed large and diverse forces to the battle. But with so many green troops on the front lines, the stage was set for one of the U.S. Army's bloodiest and most brutal urban battles in Europe. The carnage began even before the U.S. troops reached the streets of Aachen. On October 2nd, the 30th Infantry Division crossed the Würm River under heavy German fire. Their assault was preceded by an artillery and airstrike that inflicted practically no damage to German troops, safely hidden in their pillboxes. When the American soldiers approached, they were met with intense fire from machine guns, mortars, and assault guns. Despite losses, the infantry cleared pillboxes one after another using flamethrowers, pole charges, and bazookas. But that was just one part of the problem they faced. Already the following day, the Americans had to repel the counterattack of the 183rd Volksgrenadier Division. It took a lot of effort and artillery shells to fight off the Germans. In the following days, the 30th Division continued its advance through the Siegfried Line. Infantry teams followed the Shermans, capturing bunkers one by one. By October 7th, German lines were cracking, although still capable of launching fierce counterattacks. On October 8th, they tried to retake the town of Alsdorf using tanks, SS troops, and mobile infantry. American heavy artillery and tank fire repelled the attack. On October 9th, the 1st Infantry Division attacked from the south, aiming to complete a pincer movement with the 30th Infantry Division east of Aachen. After much fighting, the gap was closed on October 12th. The city of Aachen was surrounded. The presence of strong American forces around the city made all resistance futile. Yet the Germans inside Aachen were determined to keep fighting. It was a decision that would cost them dearly. On 10 October 1944, Colonel Gerhard Wilk, in command of the Aachen defense, rejected the ultimatum to surrender. American negotiators who came into the city with a white flag were given a sharp and decisive answer: "We will fight to the end." Under his command, Wilk had fewer than 2,000 men, remnants of the Volksgrenadier and SS units fighting around the city and police units. On the other side, the task of capturing Aachen was given to Colonel John Seitz in the 26th Infantry. With his forces stretched, Seitz could only send 2 battalions into the city. He also had to keep some troops in reserve in case of a counterattack, so these 2 battalions had to attack with limited support. What Seitz tried to avoid at all costs was the house-to-house fighting. He assigned Colonel Daniel's 2nd Battalion to advance along the Aachen's Cologne railway line, pushing through the city from east to west. Colonel Corley's 3rd Battalion was to move from the north, capturing key hills above the city, Leusburg, Salvatorberg, and Winterberg. On October 13th, they moved into the city. Colonel Daniel broke the 2nd Battalion into small squads, each backed by a tank or tank destroyer. Each squad was told to move from one strong point to another, using tanks to soften targets before advancing. He ordered that no squad move forward until it had contact with its neighbors. The plan failed almost immediately. Just after some squads cleared a street, German troops emerged from sewers behind them, firing into their backs. The Germans would then vanish back underground. Daniel had to halt the attack and order every cellar and manhole to be checked before moving. The assault slowed to a crawl. Colonel Corley's men faced trouble too. As they moved towards Leusburg, they reached the Blucherplatz, where German fire poured in from strong points at St. Elizabeth Hospital and the Technical College. A 20mm flak gun pinned their advance by eliminating 2 Sherman tanks. Within hours, the city was engulfed in bitter fighting. Bombs were falling all over the place, and Aachen began to burn. Smoke rose in columns. The streets were empty except for flames and rubble. In one shelter, American troops found hundreds of civilians who had been locked in for weeks. An officer demanded surrender from the shelter's guards. When refused, he threatened to use flamethrowers. That broke the standoff. When the doors opened, civilians inside came stumbling out, filthy and dazed, shouting at the Americans, "Where have you been?" Others wept with joy. One woman said, "We prayed every day for you to come. It took very fast for people to turn against their leaders." Back in the 1st Division's headquarters, General Clarence Hubner saw the resistance in Aachen was stronger than expected. The city might have been surrounded, but it was not broken. The real battle for Aachen was just beginning. To defeat the German defenders of Aachen, the U.S. troops needed to take a different approach, preferably an unconventional one. While soldiers of the 26th Infantry fought bitterly for each corner in the city, a group of Rangers OSS trainees slipped into the city dressed in German uniforms. They spoke fluent German, carried fake ID papers, and acted like German soldiers. One such team, led by Lieutenant Callaghan, targeted a signal center hidden in the city as well as an elite German unit called the Alarmenheit that was used to counter U.S. breakthroughs. The Rangers entered the city under the cover of night and moved carefully through the ruins. At one point, they were even stopped by an SS patrol that failed to see through their disguise. The Rangers even helped them dig out some civilians from a collapsed air shelter. Ultimately, the Rangers found the signal center and destroyed it. They then moved to the next target. They set up 2 German Spandau machine guns outside the Alarmenheit building. When red flares signaled a fake American artillery attack, the German troops inside ran out in confusion. The Rangers opened fire at close range, cutting them down. Dozens were killed before the Rangers vanished again into the shadows. But not only were the Rangers fighting an irregular warfare in the streets of Aachen. On the outskirts of the city, American engineers had cooked up a cunning plan. They found an old city tram in the suburb of Bertscheid and turned it into a giant bomb. They named it V-13 after the infamous German V-weapons. Painted on its side were the words Aachen Express and Berlin with an arrow pointing forward. Inside, they packed German flak shells and rigged them to blow with a timed fuse. The engineers pushed the tram down the tracks toward the city. It rattled along, and just before it reached the center of Bertscheid, it exploded too early. Although a brilliant idea, the V-13 had missed its target. Back with the regular troops, Colonel Corley of the 3rd Battalion had an idea of his own. Though it relied on conventional weapons, it was anything but ordinary. With his men pinned down near the technical high school, Corley called in heavy artillery. A 155mm gun, normally kept from behind the lines, was dragged into the heart of Aachen. If he couldn't suppress the enemy, he would destroy them outright. The gun opened fire on nearby buildings, reducing them one by one to rubble. It opened a whole new path for U.S. troops to advance. Suppressed by heavy fire and relentless attacks, the Germans were slowly backing down. Colonel Wilk, in his headquarters at the Kellenhof Hotel, reported that self-propelled guns were firing into his headquarters from 3 sides. He needed reinforcements if he was to hold on. Pretty soon, a group of soldiers from the SS 1st Battalion, led by Major Herbert Rink, arrived at the hotel. They sneaked past the U.S. troops and reinforced the beleaguered soldiers at the Kellenhof Hotel. However, the SS quickly clashed with the regular army staff, with Rink refusing to blindly follow orders from Wilk. On the other hand, Colonel Wilk thought that Rink was sent to kill him in case he offered surrender to the Americans. On October 18th, the Germans launched a counteroffensive to break the American ring around Aachen. Major Rink's SS Battalion and remnants of the infantry troops struck from the Kellenhof Hotel toward Ferrick Park, while the 3rd Panzer Grenadier and 116th Panzer Divisions attacked from outside the city. Colonel Corley's 3rd Battalion had just taken buildings in Ferrick Park and were preparing to attack Kellenhof when the SS hit them. 2 assault guns rolled forward with infantry packed closely behind, moving in what the Germans called a grape formation. From an upper window of the hotel, an SS machine gunner fired belt after belt of ammo, forcing the Americans to keep their heads down. The sudden attack overran parts of the American line. Confusion spread, allowing the SS to press on toward the edge of the park. However, a lone American mortar observer refused to retreat. Hidden in a foxhole, he called in fire on his own position. Heavy 4.2-inch mortar shells hit directly among the attackers. Within seconds, the SS scattered, leaving many dead behind. They tried twice more to advance, but the momentum was gone. Rink ordered his men to dig in. General Hubner, worried about a possible larger German attack from the outside, halted his final push for 48 hours. He requested 2 battalions of armor to prepare for a renewed assault. In the Kellenhof bunker, Wilk counted only 1,200 men left, including police, with 1 assault gun and no spare ammunition. He radioed that without a breakthrough soon, resistance would end and surrender was likely. Both sides used the pause to prepare. The Americans brought in fresh troops and armor for a final assault. In his new concrete bunker, Colonel Wilk drafted his last order to his 1,200 remaining defenders. He told them they were forced back into the smallest space but would fight to the last man, grenade, and bullet. He demanded courage and loyalty to their oath, ending with "Long live the Führer and our beloved fatherland." In the morning of October 20th, 1944, Colonel Seitz's 26th Infantry Regiment prepared for the final push into Aachen. The U.S. troops hit the ruined Kurhaus first, taking it in a rush. From there, they pushed straight toward the Kellenhof, still believed to be Colonel Wilk's headquarters. Inside, German paratroopers retreated to the upper floors and cellars as a 155mm gun fired at point-blank range into the building. Fighting turned to close quarters. Soldiers threw hand grenades at each other, then empty champagne bottles when the grenades ran out. Slowly, the defenders were driven back. 25 paratroopers lay dead before the survivors surrendered. Up north, Sherman tanks from Colonel Hogan's task force flying the Texas flag reached the slopes of the Lousberg. By taking this high ground, they closed the trap around the last German defenders. The Americans now held the high ground, the hotel, and the streets leading out of the city. Aachen was trapped. On October 21st, 1944, the last day of the battle for Aachen, Colonel Gerhard Wilk's men were exhausted. In the crowded bunker, he ordered pep pills, Preludin tablets, handed out to keep the defenders awake. Outside, a 155mm American gun fired from less than 200 yards away, pounding the defenses. Wilk tried to keep morale alive. He requested more Iron Crosses for his men and announced that the defenders were donating 10,468 Reichsmarks from their pay to Hitler's Winter Relief Fund. But the situation was hopeless. The Americans were closing in from all sides and the ammo was almost gone. At dawn, Wilk sent his final message to the 246th People's Grenadier Division. All ammo gone after severe house-to-house fighting. No water and no food. Enemy close to command post of the last defenders of the Imperial City. Radio prepared for destruction. The reply came back, "We salute you." Minutes later, the radio was smashed, cutting Aachen off from the outside. Elsewhere, Major Rink declared it was time to save his remaining SS men. He gathered the last 40 and ordered them to break into small groups and slip towards Würselen. By morning, they were gone, leaving the city to its fate. Wilk wrestled with the decision to surrender. He feared the Gestapo might punish his family back home. But with his command reduced to a few hundred exhausted men, there was no other choice. 2 captured Americans from the 1st Division, Sergeant Ewart Paget and PFC James Haswell, volunteered to carry a surrender proposal to the U.S. lines. Under fire, they reached Colonel Corley's position and returned with word that the Americans would accept. At around 10 a.m., Wilk stepped out of the bunker. He was clean-shaven, in a brush-field gray uniform carrying a camera. Escorted to Corley's command post, he surrendered formally. Before leaving, he stood before his assembled soldiers, telling them the defense was hopeless and surrender was the only option. At 12:05 p.m., the battle ended. Aachen, the first German city to fall to the Allies, was in American hands. But the city lay in ruins. The battle had destroyed or damaged nearly 80% of its remaining houses. There was no transport, gas, electricity, water, mail, or telephone. Streets were covered in wrecked vehicles and debris. Dead animals lay where they had fallen. Survivors emerged from cellars looking beaten. Victory came at a high cost, with hundreds killed on both sides and many more wounded. For those who survived, Aachen remained etched in memory as their worst nightmare of the war. One American soldier standing among Aachen's ruins summed it up perfectly. If this is victory, God help us all. Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up and please share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Militology Channel for more. Stay tuned.